Hey there, everyone. My name is Desmond from Sinorbis here in Sydney, Australia. Today is going to be a fun one. I'm sure you've jumped in for a lot of workshops so far in the program, but this one's going to be very specific. We're going to be talking about Chinese student recruitment, specifically developing a persona-driven content strategy for Chinese students and parents. Because as we all know, parents normally, while they might be influencers in the decision, in China in particular, they're very much key decision makers. So the reason why we want to, I guess, present this topic in particular and walk through it with you guys is because for universities in particular, this is something that often gets missed out. China gets treated typically as a homogenous market, and where there's one message for the whole country, no matter who they are. And this can't be further from what will actually set you apart and allow you to create meaningful connections and develop relationships to improve your recruitment numbers, but also what it means for your alumni base going forward. So we're going to be talking a lot about how this works, and I've got this great framework to go through with everyone here that's plugged in. And it's going to be essentially like a workshop where your feedback is going to be absolutely critical to putting this whole thing together. And as a, I guess, a little parting gift, everything that we produced here in the workshop, we're going to add into the goodie bag for you guys to download and have on tap later on for yourselves. So I guess one thing you might be wondering is, okay, sure, but why is this guy in Sydney in Australia, that's Sinorbis t-shirt, going to tell me about Chinese digital marketing, Chinese students and parents and what it means to recruit? I guess just a little bit of background for context as to actually why we're very qualified in this space is that Sinorbis is a tech company that allows a lot of Western institutions, mainly universities, to build, measure, and optimize their whole digital presence for China, which, as you may know, is very difficult because China has a completely separate internet. So while we help a lot of universities enable them to build their digital presence and connect with students and parents and build their brand and recruitment efforts, a lot of the times, that they do ask for our expertise and help in this space. So in the Australia and New Zealand market, for example, where we started, where 70% of universities are using our technology, most of those clients who have actually helped develop their strategy and help guide them in the right direction for how they should be building their content strategy, for what audience, on what channel, and that they've really seen, I guess, leaps and bounds in their recruitment going forward. Now, it's obviously no surprise that that's important in Australia and New Zealand, where roughly about 30% of all international recruitment comes from China. But the numbers are pretty similar when it comes to the UK and Europe, lesser so. But in the UK, we're looking at about 20-25% of all international recruitment. And that number is likely to go up as a lot of students start looking away from markets like Australia and especially the United States and onto alternate solutions, primarily in Europe. So this is going to be critical going forward. If you're a university out there, this is going to be very important to building your long-term strategy for China going forward. So as I go through this, I'm going to share my screen, so we'll work through this document together and this framework of building these personas and having, I guess, answers at the end of this as to what you should be doing for each audience and why. But I'm monitoring the chat box there, so would love to get your feedback and maybe examples of work that you guys have been doing. If you have any suggestions or ideas or questions, we'll answer it as we go, and we'll put this thing together as a team, I suppose, and then you guys will have something as a finished product at the end. So I'll start sharing my screen, and we'll go from there. Cool. So there we go. I think it's just popped up here. Now, this is going to be, I guess, just a bunch of blocks to start with. So just to give you some context of what we're looking at here, this is the basic framework we're going to use to break down the different types of main personas that you're going to want to be targeting in China. Likewise, all along the y-axis there, the main details about who they are, what they want, what are they doing at the moment that's going to make your messages relevant to them, what channels are going to be mainly accessible to them, and how you can do that. And then based on all that information, it's making sure you're getting them the right message at the right time. Because at the end of the day, this is what's going to improve your strategy going forward, is having a more relevant message, as opposed to a blanket message for all of China to say how great your institution is, because ultimately it falls on deaf ears unless it's more relevant to their actual experience. So you can see here on the x-axis at the top, I've broken it down into 3 main personas. Of course, you can get very nitty-gritty and start focusing on all the different personas that are possible here. But I guess just to break it down to 3 main ones will be critical here. You can see you've got on A, prospective students. This goes without saying, these are the students that you're going after as an institution. They're in your target market. And likewise, persona B, persona A are the prospective parents. Now, in any other market, your parents are key decision makers. But China more so than anywhere else. And that sort of Confucian familial mindset is really the driver for this, where the older generations have a lot to say, particularly when it comes to education as a sort of cornerstone of Chinese culture. So making sure you've got an idea of what you're going to be presenting to parents and what you're going to be presenting to students, because at the end of the day, while they're generally aligned, they're actually going to want different things. And it's really important to be able to differentiate that. And as a third persona there, we've got the alumni. Now, I've put this in particular because this market often gets overlooked by many institutions. Your students come here, they study, and then they leave, and that's pretty much it. But what we found there is that because there's such a gap, it's a huge missed opportunity for many institutions to engage with their alumni base in China. It's going to be your alumni who are going to be your greatest advocates, your greatest KOLs or key opinion leaders and decision makers, influencers. And further to that, there's potential there for future study, as well as being able to leverage their networks for your future recruitment. So being able to engage with them ongoing is going to be actually a really important part for your strategy in China as a whole. But if you ask the recruitment teams for most institutions, this is an afterthought, and it really shouldn't be. So we'll go into how this really important segment is going to play out as well. So I guess we'll tackle this kind of one box at a time. Again, guys, I might throw some questions out there. If you're comfortable answering, I'd be happy to bring this into the session and hear your experience or any ideas and suggestions. Because while I've got an idea of what should happen here, ultimately, you guys with a finger on the pulse, speaking to students day in, day out, marketing to these demographics, your experience is going to be critical here to shaping what you think is going to resonate with these personas. This should just give you a good framework and idea of how you should be structuring it. So I guess we'll start here with the who when it comes to the parents. So I'll type in as we go, but who are we dealing with here? Typically, we're looking at, say, an older generation. Potentially one that doesn't necessarily actually speak English that well. Now, this is an important part because, I've actually heard from some universities, their initial strategy going into China was, look, we don't need a Chinese language website because, we have strict English language requirements. And so look, if the students need to be able to pass those requirements to apply, well, then they have to be able to at least read the website. And this might be true, but there's a huge downside to doing that. Firstly, you've alienated these key decision makers, being the parents, who are not going to understand what's going on and will need third-party assistance, which you've just created a barrier to your own recruitment channel. But secondly, you've missed the opportunity there, which we'll talk into a lot more detail later on, around how you guys index your web presence. How visible are you really? If you're able to, create a viable digital presence that actually loads in China, great job. But then, how are you going to turn up on search engines when these Chinese parents are searching specific keywords to look into what might be the best institution for their child, and you don't turn up? Well, you're still invisible then. So really important then to make sure that Chinese content is paramount in all aspects of the channels you want to run in this country. Who are they further? We're talking about a generation here who have seen the largest growth in human history, arguably, over the last 40 years of Chinese development. And in that process, they might have moved to many different parts of the country as they went to seek work, greater urbanization. So with that in mind, it might be worth making a point here to suggest that they're in multiple types of cities where they've been able to create wealth to afford essentially for their children to study abroad, not necessarily just in the main cities of Shanghai, Beijing, those sort of tier 1 cities, but I think more of those sort of tier 2, tier 3 that have developed a lot of wealth, in particular in the last 10 years. We're talking about Shenyang up in the northeast of China. An often unlooked city of about 10 million people, places like that. So it's really important to consider that as part of your messaging out there for this audience. Now, I think that just gives a basic idea of who the persona is here. What about for prospective students? Well, we know these guys are young, goes without saying, same with all of your other target audiences. But these guys are particularly tech savvy. They have grown up with digital being the primary driver for every aspect of their life since birth, more so than the West in general terms. You take an app like WeChat, for example, which is basically has an omnipresence in Chinese society for chatting with friends, going for meals, booking cabs, paying for everything, including donations to the homeless. It goes without saying that these guys are unfamiliar with an analog world. So being tech savvy is an understatement, and it's something to really consider here. But further to that, these guys too are coming from multiple cities with multiple backgrounds, just as their parents were, and have moved around for work. These guys have now grown up in those new environments, of which might be quite new for their family as a whole. And then we get to the persona C of the alumni. Now, obviously, these guys are sort of young to mid-aged. We're talking sort of young professionals here in their mid-20s to sort of mid-30s, fresh off a great experience at your institution. But what they've done is then typically about 80% of Chinese international students will do this, is actually return back to China to seek employment. Now, while having opportunities for employment abroad is definitely sought after, what's really important to note here is that Chinese companies hold international education in very high regard. So it really is the prospect for their employment at home, which is a key consideration for them. So they're likely back in China, if I can spell, back in China, working entry to mid-level jobs, employment, and further to that, these guys might be starting to earn an income for themselves, starting to build a family. So relatively high income earners. And again, I'm going to make lots of spelling mistakes throughout this workshop. So, if I've spelled something so bad that you can't tell what it is, feel free to pop it into the chat box and I will fix it up. So you can see here, we've got 3 very different personas. And as you would in any case, marketing to any group, to see different personas this different, why would you market them all with the same message? Of course you wouldn't. So that's what we're going to unpack here today. So what are their wants and needs? So Basically, what we're talking about here is what they're looking for and what are their concerns. So in the case of the parents, they might be looking for a high level of education for their children. Now, this is likely off the back of giving them access to opportunity that themselves and certainly their parents did not have, which is very important, which is, I guess, building that generational equity throughout Chinese society. And so giving them this opportunity is paramount. There's obviously the high level of education for their children, and there's many different aspects to this. One of which is, the children one day are likely going to look after their parents and their grandparents. And so enabling them to be as successful as possible is, I guess, in the net best interest to a Chinese nuclear family, for lack of a better word there. Of course, it doesn't apply. I guess generational equity is an important thing. Giving opportunity for success. But what are their concerns? It's very, I guess, nice to say that. Now, if you guys have any particular concerns you've come across from parents, feel free to type it away. I can think of a few off the top of my head, but it'd be great to add in some extra ones there, some curveballs, if you will, because the more well-rounded we can make this, the better. Living in Australia, I can tell you, and I work with a lot of Chinese nationals who did study in Australia. One of the things that the parents that they mentioned to me as a concern of their parents in particular was the general safety and well-being of the children. And I don't mean this necessarily in terms of what's it like to walk down the street at night kind of vibe. It really comes down to a geopolitical scenario that can actually affect the perception of your destination as a whole. It might be completely out of your hands as a university, but nonetheless, because of all of these other forces at play, you now have to address this concern. So safety is a primary concern, I would say, for parents in this case. In the case of Australia at the moment, there's no secret that there is somewhat of a political row between Australian and Chinese governments, entirely based on rhetoric. In this case, there's been lots of recorded instances of the Chinese government and Ministry of Education actually putting messages out there to parents looking to study abroad, advising them to look elsewhere as a destination. Now, of course, if this is the only message the parents are hearing, this is what they're likely to understand and perceive as a potential threat, real or otherwise. So I guess it's really important here to make sure that you are another voice in the consideration set that can offset any particularly damaging or just simply incorrect assumptions coming from the parents. So safety is a primary concern. I suppose another concern here would be around performance. It's a huge investment coming from the parents here to be sending their children to an overseas education. They're going to want return on an investment. So they're looking for performance metrics. They're looking for rankings for universities. They're looking for educational achievements, notable alumni. They're looking for these high measures of success to know that their kid isn't just going there to have a worldly experience, but is actually going to be coming back with a high guarantee of success in their careers going forward. So performance for future career is going to be paramount here. Again, you guys probably should be thinking here, what kind of messaging is going to resonate with the parents? Potentially average income for graduates coming out of schools. A couple of universities in Australia have run with those messaging, and it's worked particularly well in China. Not only because obviously the average income was particularly high, but because it actually resonated with Chinese parents far more than any other demographic. So this is, again, a key concern. What about the students, though? Now, they're also obviously looking for a great experience, but potentially they're going to want something with a little bit more interest, a little bit more spark. Obviously, they're going to be very similar when it comes to performance of future careers. I'm just going to copy that literally into this box. It's no doubt an important feature for the students. But they're also looking for a lifestyle, aren't they? They're looking for a genuine experience. This isn't a means to an end necessarily. It's a chance to spread their wings. For many of them, it might be their first time living in an overseas country or traveling in an overseas country. China is huge. Domestic tourism is enormous. You know, it's all too common as an Australian or to say, oh yeah, you know, I've seen more of Europe than I have of Australia. That might well be true, but in China, you know, it's different. While if it's a very large country and there's a lot to see, so while performance of future careers, lifestyle is going to be incredibly important. Not just in terms of the city that they move to and the feeling of the place, as well as the country, but what opportunities are there for travel while they're in said country? So lifestyle and travel opportunities. One of the reasons why Australia is a top place in particular is because of the concept and idea of travel with natural beauty and nice landscapes. While studying in Germany, while you might exactly have that, obviously its position in Central Europe is another added benefit, which Australia wouldn't have. These are all going through the minds of Chinese students when they're looking to study abroad. And you might find some other sillier things too. A colleague of mine who studied in both Ireland and Australia, she's Chinese, actually suggested to me that one of her concerns for studying here was the prospect of giant spiders. It sounds silly, but you know, this again is part of the perception. What you hear about these countries and opportunities can boil down to stereotypes. Believe it or not, we can't take for granted that these students are going to have all the information they need ready to go. Of course, in this case, my colleague is right about the spiders, but it's not going to detract from the overall experience. So I want to put this in here as it's part of the key concerns is vulnerable to stereotypes. Oops. Stereotypes and potentially misinformation. So again, if they're getting their information from general platforms and ideas like government announcements, like broad stroke messages around what it's like to study in the UK, it's not quite going to hit the nail on the head, considering the propensity here to, I guess, succumb to rhetoric as a whole. What's going to cut through that? The opinion of other students. So in this case, wants and needs are going to be connections with other students beforehand and other students while they're there. Two reasons beforehand is to get an understanding of what it's going to be like and hear it from a first-hand Chinese experience. For Chinese students, hearing the experience of, say, a Brazilian international student in France is just not going to be adequate. What it's like to be a Chinese student is a unique experience for them. And they feel that way for various reasons that aren't worth getting into too much detail here for. But ultimately, being able to understand that the place that they're moving to has the right combination of accessibility for them, but also the right balance there of adventure and something that's completely new. So that's why it's important to be speaking with them beforehand. And if you guys are joining in on this, you know that UniBuddy is a particularly useful tool for that. But likewise, once we know that once they speak with a student beforehand, that's good. But what about the connections during? Building their connections while they're having their stay in their country of choice is going to be critical for them. They're going to be looking for social events that they can take part in. It's not all academia. I suppose this ties in a little bit with the lifestyle, but understanding the societies that they can join at university, the clubs that they can join, the social opportunities that are at play are going to really make or break the feeling of the student as to where they want to study. So connections with other students, I'll just make a note here saying before study and during. So being able to bounce these ideas off their peers is incredibly important. So again, I guess the wheel should be turning here and thinking, okay, what kind of content is actually going to resonate with these guys then, as opposed to the parents? But then we get to the alumni, a completely different audience here in terms of their wants and needs. Typically, they've already studied, they've already taken these steps, they've already had the adventure. So what are their wants and needs or concerns? What are they wanting? Wanting success in their current role and potentially their career going forward. But more so than that, they're wanting, I guess, as much recognition on the prestige that's attributed to their educational background. Now, what I mean by that is an alumni community that they can take part in, where they're actually able to track the progress and performance of their fellow alumni, particularly in China, but also abroad. And what this allows for is a really interesting sense of pride with their accomplishments and the fact that they're connected to this, I guess, group. It'll help foster, I guess, a sense of comfort knowing that, I guess they're part of this wider group as a whole, but it also means that they are able to form these connections. And I suppose a little bit in Chinese, it's called guanxi, with these people who are going to be successful in their careers going forward. So to be able to take part in a group like that is actually an edge, a competitive edge. And in China, where you've got 1.4 billion people, workforces are completely overloaded, any kind of competitive edge is sought after. So connecting with an alumni network and adding that level of prestige to their educational background is actually really important. And it's a real need that, again, gets completely overlooked by universities when it comes to China. Generally because they find it difficult to communicate with this audience, but it could be as simple as setting up a WeChat group. But we'll get into that in a little bit. So what else are their concerns here? Well, they might not have any concerns with what they've done, but they might have concerns with their current level of education if they need to study further. So do they need continued study? Is that going to get them the competitive edge going forward, like we talked about? So if they completed a bachelor program at your university and 2 years later, working back in Shanghai, for example, they realize that actually a master's degree is really going to help them get a competitive edge to get the job that they want or the salary that they're looking for. You are in the best position to be able to, I guess, for lack of a better word here, resell to that audience. They know you, they trust you, and hopefully they've been consistently engaging with you. So you've built out this connection with this individual and you have the exact service that's needed for them to achieve what they want. It's a totally missed opportunity if they end up deciding to go study somewhere else because you weren't communicating with them. So in this case, making sure you're available for this decision later on is important. Again, for China, having those secondary degrees is very important, much like how it is in Europe. In order to get ahead, that's just what's needed. So let's get into what are they doing? What's relevant to them at the moment, like right now? If we talk about the parents, what might be relevant to them at the moment? I mean, in terms of looking for a place to study for their children, they might be thinking money. How are we going to raise the funds to make sure this happens? How are we going to afford this? What do we have to sacrifice to make this work? This is incredibly important, and it's going to be something that Chinese parents are going to be thinking of quite a bit. And sacrifices that get made in this instance are huge because of how important it is to the parents. So they're going to be thinking money. What else are they thinking about? I guess it comes vaguely back to the wants and needs. They're looking at performance. So they're looking for metrics. They're looking for ideas. So they're looking and researching for performance metrics on unis. They're looking up rankings. They're looking up chat boards. They're looking up, I guess, aggregate sites that rate universities. They might even be speaking with recruitment agencies. Get the ball rolling with a recruitment agency. Notice how I haven't quite mentioned speaking with the university directly. And that's because for most universities, they actually don't have a web presence that's visible there. And I'll get into a little bit more about how this works and why it's important later. But they might be speaking with recruitment agencies. What else might they be doing? Potentially simply searching the names of well-known institutions. So searching on search engines, doing their due diligence and research in this case, looking for what's important. And what exactly can they be searching for? Well, probably the same thing as those wants and needs that we just talked about. Cool. So we get into the prospective students. What are these guys looking for? What are they doing at the moment? Well, if they're young, they're likely going through what's known in China as the Gaokao, those final set of high school exams that for many students is the be-all, end-all for their prospects. It's the final exam, in case you don't know, that they take in high school to determine what university they're going to get access to in China. It's the most important exam of their lives. Unbelievable amount of pressure gets put on these kids. But two scenarios arise. If they're wealthy enough, they might have been looking for international education anyway. So the Gaokao might not matter too much. They might even look for an international baccalaureate, an IB exam to be taken in its stead. If not, international education can sometimes be a fallback. Maybe the Gaokao results weren't as nice as they wanted it to be to get into the right top institution in China, and they don't want to settle for anything else. So going abroad is the next best option. All these things are possible and very realistic. So I'm going to put here the Gaokao final exams. That's what's going through these students' heads at the moment. Everything comes down to that because that's going to be, I guess, the golden ticket as to where they're going and what they're doing. But once they've got the Gaokao sorted, they might have a wish list of possible places. So developing wish lists, which again would come into those wants and needs that we talked about. They're going to be using that criteria of what are the lifestyles, what are the travel opportunities, what is the performance for future careers, but what are the student connection possibilities on campus going to be like? What's my living situation? They're going to be taking all of this into consideration and developing a wish list that they would be going to their parents for permission. Parents' permission. I can't stress that one enough. Doesn't matter how good the wish list is, if the parents don't want them to go there, that's generally what's going to happen. So we're getting into, I guess, a short list of maybe where they want to go, and knowing that they're going to need to seek out parental approval. Now, if there's anything else that you guys feel should fit in here to any of these boxes, but mainly, what you think the life of and what's going on in the Chinese student head is right now as they're looking to study abroad, feel free to drop a line, put it in the chat box, and we'll add it in. I'd be very interested to hear what you guys have to say on this. And now for something completely different. But before that, actually, I'm just going to add in developing a wish list that comes in with lots of search. They're going to be searching. They're going to be on the same digital, search engines in China, which there are 4 major ones, and more than that even, looking for these universities and what they can find for information online. But one thing that the parents and students are going to be doing together is speaking to their networks, going to their friends and family directly and asking them what their experience is. And if their cousin's uncle's friend knows somebody who one time decided they maybe wanted to go to that university and researched it, they're going to be able to get in contact with that person and find out what their experience was like. So peer-to-peer connection is incredibly important here for both students and parents. They're going to be speaking to everyone in the network, and we'll get into the channels shortly after this as to how they're going to be connecting with those people. But this is so critical. And if you can somehow make it easier for people to talk about your institution with each other, then you're winning every day. Your student recruitment is going to be 1,000 times better. Your brand is going to explode because you found a way to make your product relevant and be visible in the conversations that people are having with each other about you, rather than you just broadcasting a message from Europe to China, hoping it lands. So we're getting to our final persona here, your alumni. Now, what are they doing? They are working what's known in China as the 996, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. Especially as a graduate, this is typical. They're working their butts off, especially the guys coming with an international education, coming back to China, working in China organizations. They managed to get the job because of their edge of their study abroad. But to keep your job, you work bloody hard in China. And so they're going to be working constantly, earning a living, day in, day out. This is really important to understand here. They're now time poor. Previously, as a student, after finishing their Gaokao exams, they've got time for research, they've got time for investment in other areas of their life. But once they start their working career in China, especially in one of the major cities, they are incredibly time poor. So when it comes to research and them considering, I need further education to better my employment chances, to get the job I want, to get the career, to get the right salary for my family that I'm building, what are they thinking? Well, they don't have a lot of time to go speak with recruitment agencies and consult a series of people, although they will have networks that they can quickly access. But this is a classic example where you've done all the hard work to build an incredible connection with this human, and they're looking to make a decision that would benefit them, but they're time poor. Well, guess what? You're top of mind already. So make the most of that opportunity is what I can say on that. So they're time poor, but they're considering other study, speaking with immediate network. I'm talking about friends and family, but also their new colleagues, which likely would also have a lot of international education in these sort of major companies. So, how they speak about their experience abroad is also going to be an impact here. So now let's get into the channels. You might find that when it comes to, say, organizing different channels for different personas in the West, there's a lot of difference. The older generation and the parents might be on Facebook, whereas the kids mainly on Instagram or TikTok. But in China, it's actually a little bit more homogenous when it comes to reaching them as a university, getting them on the right channels. And we've talked a lot about this to start with. Search marketing, super important. It's the first thing that they do. First thing the parents do and the first thing the students do is search. They're going to go to Baidu or Shenme, 360, Sogo, whatever it is. They're going to go there first and foremost and look up, say, study in the UK. Are you going to come up on that search list? Probably not. But if you set up your digital assets properly, you would. And that puts you in a much better position going forward, given that you're one of the first things that they see as part of this process. So I'm going to add that into both of these. And that obviously comes into play with a website. Now, websites in China obviously are quite unique. They need to be set up with a completely separate digital ecosystem from the rest of your web presence. So it's vital that you have something specific for China that loads well in China, so that if they are able to find you, it works well and seamless. That's really what's at play here. Another one, this is an easy one. You guys have all heard of WeChat. Look, it's you know WeChat's important, but I guess understanding exactly how it gets used is a whole nother workshop on its own. What's important here for today's exercise is understanding that WeChat is used not only for people to search you and to share you with their friends and networks, which, like I mentioned before, is really important to make sure you're in place when people are talking about you. Being able to share your WeChat account is critical for that. So it's how they find more information about you. It's also how they connect with you directly. WeChat has a direct messaging function between person and company. So not only is it possible, but you're actually expected to be able to field these questions and direct questions. It's a missed opportunity if you don't, of course, but it's expected and part of the general user experience that if they have a question about any of those concerns, if they want to know about the spiders, if they want to know about what social opportunities are available or what safety is like in the neighborhood, these questions are going to be directed straight to you, and you've got to be able to field them. So again, going to add WeChat to both of these. And what's next? You might think about potentially advertising on these channels too. Of course, there can be a wide spread of different channels to advertise on in China. But at the end of the day, you've got some assets set up for China at this point, potentially a website, potentially a WeChat account. Why not leverage those as much as possible? Setting up landing pages to drive traffic to, potentially on the Tencent display network, running media activations with the right messages. This can be really impactful for China, especially when you're talking about coming up to enrollment season. Getting them at the right place, right time with the right message while they're in that research mode, looking for institutions is going to be very impactful. So I'd say media campaigns, look into the Tencent network, and also potentially the ByteDance network, the company that of course owns Douyin or TikTok, as well as many other really useful Chinese websites like Toutiao as well, which is kind of like Reddit in many ways for China. So I'm gonna again copy and paste that here. Notice how I haven't really specified specific channels for these groups because they can vary quite a bit. And surprise, surprise, all of these are also going to be applicable for the alumni. So really important that you're setting this up appropriately because it's actually beneficial for every single one of your personas. The channels are effectively the same because the same research and availability of information is really what you want to be providing here before you start worrying about other media activations and what's trending at the moment. Don't worry about that if you haven't set up your digital foundations. You can drive traffic to, grow your follower base, and build from there. And finally, content. What messages are going to resonate with your audience? And, we might be able to throw a couple out really quickly as I'm mindful of time. But I think we've got a lot of information here as to what sort of quick fire examples we might have here as content. So when it comes to content for your parents, what are we thinking about? Maybe notable alumni write-ups. We talked about the performance of your institution being really important to the parents. If you've got some notable alumni to talk about and how good their careers have been after studying with you, that's going to go a long way with the parents. So it's likely, again, apologies, notable alumni write-ups. What else might be important here? How about work options after graduating? Talking about the employability of your students, because again, return on investment and the amount of money that they're going to have to invest into these courses for their kids, they're going to be looking at that ROI. To know that these graduates are going to earn a good income relatively quickly outside of uni is a huge plus that resonates with parents, and it's going to swing quite a bit. What else might be here? We can talk about general safety, but why not talk about safety in the framework of a community? So, community safety, where you talk about safety through the lens of how good it is of having a safe community that can house and accommodate for Chinese international students. You know, for something in the United States, for example, gun violence is an issue. And it's something that Chinese parents are really thinking about when it comes to sending their kids there. So talking about the welfare and success of the Chinese students that are already there and have been there is going to be critical to your messaging. That should give you some examples there. How about the students? Well, we want to know about lifestyle and living opportunities. You know, what is it like to live there on the ground? What does it feel like? You know, are there parties? Is there a cultural vibe? Is there access to many different types of people that they can expand their horizons with? This is going to be really important and magnetic for Chinese students looking abroad. Obviously, you're going to be looking for work opportunities after graduating as well. So we're going to copy that across. And then you might be looking at other things. If we look back up to what they're doing, you know, they're doing the Gaokao exams, they're developing a wish list, they're looking for peer-to-peer connections. And if we think about these channels in particular, what can we do? We can encourage them to join our peer-to-peer networks. Encourage them to speak to students on a UniBuddy app, for example. Encourage them to take part and to join your WeChat account and to speak with fellow-minded students on WeChat groups that you moderate and manage. This is going to be critical. For one, it's going to increase your effectiveness to recruit them going forward. But two, this is actually what they want. They want to be able to speak to the experience on their terms, not hear blanket messages about how good the university is, of which every other university is saying the same thing. So this is going to cut through all of that and provide yourselves with the best opportunity to relate to the students. And finally, we get to the alumni content. Money. We talked about how time poor they are. We talked about what their goals are. They want the higher education, not because it's just a nice thing to have on the wall, but because it's going to give them the best opportunity going forward in their careers. So talking about money and advancement opportunities, I'll call it, in career is going to be critical. Lifestyle, you know, jumping into that environment might be good. But again, if they've already done that in the previous engagement with you, it's not actually the driving force and the reason why they choose to study again. It's these other drivers as well. And potentially other skill development. Now, they're looking to study because they're looking to advance their careers. So what does this mean for you guys? There's other options here to, I guess, promote yourselves to be able to assist them in addition to that basic setup of, oh yeah, you come, you get your degree, you learn what the outline said you would, and that's it. You know, what other options do they have for extracurricular development, whether it comes to soft skills, international business acumen? This is where you can really make yourselves different, set yourselves apart, and cater to exactly what the alumni base want to hear. So that's some ideas. I'm sure you guys have your own set of experiences that you've gone through already with this. I hope that this gave you some new thoughts and ideas to work with, to incorporate into your plans. I've just saved it here. I'm going to make sure this gets included in the digital goodie bag, so you guys will have access to this going forward. And of course, going forward from this, I'd be happy to be a resource for you if you want to bounce some ideas around, or if you want to assess and make sure those digital channels that we talked about are actually up to scratch and are going to facilitate for your recruitment and branding. To make sure not only are they visible, but are they working for me in China? Are they actually facilitating good traffic growth, growing your follower base, and making sure that actually your recruitment goals are going to be hit and you don't just have those assets for the sake of having them. So I'll be in the speakers lounge after this, and of course I'll put my email there in the chat box as well. If you guys have any other questions going forward, be happy to just to help out, jump on a call. We do this all the time, so be happy to jump in at any point. But thank you very much for your time today. It was great to speak with you all. I hope you've got something out of this session today, and looking forward to speaking with you at a later time.